Commodore Augustus Willington Shelton Agar VC, DSO. RN was a Royal Navy officer in both the First and the Second World Wars and a recipient of the Victoria Cross, the highest award for gallantry in the face of the enemy that can be awarded to British and Commonwealth forces. In his naval biography, Footprints in the Sea, published in 1961, Agar described himself as highly strung and imaginative. The Oxford Dictionary of National Biography says that Agar epitomizes the sea dog of British naval tradition: honourable, extremely brave and totally dedicated to king, country and the Royal Navy. Early life. Augustus Agar was born in Kandy, Ceylon, on the 4th of January 1890. He was the 13th child of John Shelton Agar or Agar, an Irishman from Milltown, County Kerry, who had left his native land in 1860 to become a successful tea planter in Ceylon. Agar was brought up in comfortable circumstances in a fine house with servants. Agar's mother, who was Austrian, died shortly after his birth, and at the age of 8 he was sent with one of his brothers to school in England. All his brothers were educated in English public schools, and all his sisters were educated in Austrian and German schools. His father died in 1902 of cholera, which he had caught during a visit to China. Augustus Agar attended Framlingham College in Suffolk. He was now without parents or a fixed home, and his oldest brother, Shelton, determined that he should go into the Navy. Gus, who idolized his older brother, willingly agreed. To prepare, he attended Eastman's Royal Naval Academy in Southsea. A friend of the family, Sir Henry Jackson, later an admiral and First Sea Lord, nominated Agar for a place in the annual intake of naval cadets. After time spent with A. Cramer, he passed the entrance exams and in 1904 joined the Naval Cadet School, HMS Britannia, at Dartmouth. The Britannia was a wooden man-of-war, obsolete when launched in 1860, and soon tied up and used as a stationary training ship. As a part of his training, Agar went to sea in a 5,650-ton second-class cruiser, HMS Highflyer, and afterwards on the slightly older HMS Isis. These ships were stationed at Bermuda, and many classes were held ashore when the ships were in port. Agar had many pleasant memories of sports, swimming, boating and picnics during this period. Agar served at sea in a number of ships in the pre-war period, including the battleships HMS Prince of Wales, attached to the Mediterranean Fleet, and HMS Queen, commanded by Captain David Beatty. He greatly admired Beatty's dash and style. Agar's early training gave him a thorough grounding in basic naval matters, especially in handling small boats. This was to prove a great asset later in his career. In 1910, Agar passed his seamanship examination with flying colors and was made an acting sub-lieutenant. During 1911, he served aboard a destroyer, HMS Ruby. He spent the next period on course at Portsmouth and studying at the Royal Naval College, Greenwich. He was promoted to lieutenant on the 30th of June 1912. After his courses were complete, Agar was assigned to small ships, his first being torpedo boat No. 23. In April 1913 he was sent to learn to fly. It was not entirely his métier, though he obtained his license after enduring 3 crashes in the very primitive aircraft of the time. He joined the pre-dreadnought battleship HMS Hibernia in September 1913, attached to the home fleet. During this period Agar became a gunnery expert. First World War. The Grand Fleet. Agar was aboard the Hibernia when the First World War broke out in August 1914, and soon sailed with her to Britain's wartime base at Scapa Flow. He was a part of Admiral Sir John Jellicoe's Grand Fleet. As newer and faster dreadnoughts joined the fleet, the pre-dreadnoughts became increasingly obsolete, being slower, with much less firepower and poor design features. the Dardanelles and guard duty. In the summer of 1915 it was decided to send Hibernia out to the Dardanelles to provide gunnery support to the Allied landings on the Gallipoli Peninsula. She arrived in September 1915 at the Royal Navy base at Moudros on the Greek island of Lemnos at the entrance to the straits leading to the Black Sea. The sheltered waters of the Aegean Sea and the straits enabled Hibernia to use all her guns, and she was employed in firing at Turkish targets on Gallipoli and the nearby Asia Minor shore. She was hit once by a Turkish shell, but not seriously damaged. Hibernia returned to Britain when the Allies evacuated Gallipoli and was stationed at Rosyth with others of her class to guard against raids on the British coast by German ships. Because of the slow speed and weak offensive power, the pre-dreadnought battleships were not ordered to join the Grand Fleet for the Battle of Jutland on the 31st of May 1916, though they got up steam pending the outcome of the engagement. North Russia. After Jutland, the battleship threat from Germany receded somewhat and the danger from mines and submarines grew. Especially vulnerable were the two ports of Murmansk and Archangel in North Russia, used by British merchant ships bringing materiel to their ally. Mine-sweeping naval trawlers were sent to counter this threat, and two old cruisers were modified to act as repair workshops and headquarters for this flotilla. Agar joined one of them, HMS Iphigenia, executive officer, in December 1916. The Iphigenia, dated from 1892, displaced 3,400 tons and in her early days could make 20 knots. Iphigenia arrived at Murmansk in March 1917, just as the Russian Revolution was beginning. She operated out of Archangel in the summer when the White Sea was clear, and from the ice-free Murmansk in the winter. Although it was apparent to local Allied commanders that the materiel landed after the spring of 1917 was not being put to good use, their advice to stop the flow was ignored by Whitehall. Indeed, much of the materiel was either destroyed or ended up being used by the Bolsheviks of the Germans. While at Murmansk, Agar had the opportunity to renew acquaintance with Russian officer friends from the cruiser Askold, which was berthed alongside. He had served with them in the Dardanelles when he was on HMS Hibernia. He met them again at the Devonport dockyard. However, mutiny soon broke out on the Askold, and Agar was shocked to see his officer friends arrested one by one and taken ashore, not to be seen again. Discipline aboard the ship broke down completely, and after the last of the food and supplies were consumed, she was abandoned to rust away. This difficult and occasionally dangerous mission occupied the Iphigenia until the end of February 1918, when worsening conditions and a hostile Bolshevik government prompted a withdrawal. The British were able to take away with them a number of Russians fleeing the Bolsheviks. The Russian experience was of value to Agar later in his career. Coastal motorboats. Agar served in the coastal motorboats in home waters during the latter part of the war. These small vessels displaced just 5 tons, compared to the 1,110 tons of a First World War-era destroyer. The main offensive weapon was a torpedo. They were of shallow draft and could operate close inshore. The CMBs carried 1 or 2 torpedoes, depending on whether they were 40-footers or 55-footers. Mines could be substituted for torpedoes, and they also carried depth charges and Lewis guns. It was planned that they be either towed or carried into battle on the German-controlled coast by the light cruisers and destroyers of Commodore Sir Reginald Tirrett's Harwich Force. With the shallow draft they could skim over the mines and attack the German patrol craft around Heligoland. As 1918 wore on, a more ambitious scheme matured to send the CMBs in over the shallow coastal waters to attack the German fleet at its anchorage. However, the armistice occurred on the 11th of November 1918 before these plans could be put into effect. It was as a torpedo and mining officer that Augustus Agar was selected for this service. He participated in the famous raid on Zeebrugge led by Commodore Roger Keyes, CMBs being used to lay smoke screens outside the mold to cover the escape of the crews of the block ships. During the summer of 1918, he was stationed at Dover and at Dunkirk, where the CMBs attacked German patrol craft along the Belgian coast, the Baltic and the Bolsheviks. The end of the war found him at the CMB base at Ossia Island in Essex, England. He was asked in late 1918 by Sir George Mansfield Smith Cumming, head of the foreign section of the British Secret Intelligence Service, to volunteer for a mission in the Baltic Sea, where CMBs were to be used to ferry British agents back and forth from Bolshevik Russia. The shallow draft and high speed of the CMB made it ideal for landing on enemy-occupied shores and making a quick getaway. Agar and his two boats were technically under the command of the Foreign Office. Agar set up a small base at Terajoki, just inside Finland and close to the Soviet frontier. From here he undertook a top-secret and dangerous mission to retrieve Paul Dukes, a man he knew only by the MI6 codename St-25, for the coast of the Bay of Petrograd, the last British agent left in Russia. Dukes had been infiltrating the Bolshevik government for some time and had made copies of top-secret documents. A master of disguise, he was known as the man with 100 faces, but his resources had run out by this time. In order to spirit Dukes away, Agar's boats had to cross Bolshevik minefields and pass by a number of forts and ships guarding the entrance to the Bolshevik naval base at Kronstadt and to Petrograd, now St. Petersburg. Also operating in the eastern Baltic Sea was a Royal Navy detachment of light cruisers and destroyers under Admiral Sir Walter Cowan. Though technically not connected, Agar regularly reported to Cowan and received assistance from him. Cowan's mission was to keep the sea lanes open to the new republics of Finland, Latvia, Estonia and Lithuania, which were under threat of being overrun by Soviet Russia. On the missions, Agar and his crews dressed in civilian clothes to maintain the fiction that Britain was not involved. They had a uniform on board in case they were in danger of capture. Without the uniform, they could be shot as spies. Agar felt that his small force should be doing more than acting as a shuttle service. The Bolsheviks had seized much of the Russian fleet at Kronstadt, and Agar considered these vessels a menace to British operations and took it upon himself to attack the enemy battleships. He set out with his two boats, HM Coastal Motorboat 4 and another, on the 17th of June 1919. One had to turn back before completing its mission, but Agar continued into the bay. The battleships were not in the harbor though. CMB-4 penetrated a destroyer screen and was closing on a larger warship further inshore when CMB-4, whose hull had been damaged by gunfire, broke down. She had to be taken alongside a breakwater for repairs and for 20 minutes was in full view of the enemy. The attack was then resumed and a Russian cruiser, the 6,645-ton Oleg, was sunk, after which Agar retired to the safety of the open bay under heavy fire. For this he was awarded the Victoria Cross and was promoted to Lieutenant Commander on the 30th of June 1919. Realizing the utility of the CMBs, Cowan ordered more to be sent out from England to add to his fleet. On the 18th of August 1919, Agar took his remaining boat against the Soviets, acting as guide ship to a flotilla of 6 others, leading them through the minefields and past the forts. Agar's boat was ordered to stay outside the harbour, and the attack was led by Commander Claude Dobson. They entered Kronstadt harbour, this time damaging 2 battleships, 17,400-ton pre-dreadnought Andrei Pavasvany and dreadnought Petropavlovsk, and sinking a submarine depot ship, the 6,734-ton Pamiat Azavar. Dukes, meanwhile, thinking Agar dead because of his failure to appear at the rendezvous point, resolved to leave Petrograd by land and was forced to jump from tram to tram in the city to shake off Cheka agents. After a series of extraordinary adventures through war-torn Latvia under a variety of disguises, he got back to London with his secret documents copied onto tissue paper. He was subsequently knighted by King George VI, and remains the only man to be knighted based entirely on his exploits as a spy. For his part in the Kronstadt action, Agar was awarded the DSO. Dobson and another RNB officer, Gordon Steele, received Victoria Crosses. The British naval presence in the Baltic Sea was crucial to securing the independence of Estonia and Latvia. Between the wars, immediately following his Baltic experiences, Agar returned to Ossia Island. On the 20th of July 1920 he married Mary Petra, 19th Baroness Furnivall. Agar held a number of seagoing commands between the wars. His first, in June 1920, was as executive officer aboard HMS Chatham, a 5,400-ton light cruiser assigned to the newly formed New Zealand Naval Forces, later known as the New Zealand Division. In 1922, he was given command of HMS Philomel, an obsolete cruiser of 2,575 tons used as a training ship for the New Zealand Division. These were very happy years for Agar, in a friendly country with interesting work and regular cruises through the South Seas. On the 1st of January 1924, at the request of King George V, Agar was appointed captain of the Royal Yacht HMY Victoria and Albert, another pleasant duty. He served until January 1925. A great professional assignment in April 1926 was command of the 4th Destroyer Flotilla assigned to the Mediterranean Fleet. The Commander-in-Chief, Admiral Sir Roger Keyes, specifically asked for Agar. Keyes was an outstanding leader and brought the fleet to the height of its efficiency. The flotilla consisted of 4 ships, and Agar commanded the flotilla leader HMS Widger until July 1927. By the late 1920s, Agar and his wife were living apart. They divorced in 1931. This probably had an adverse effect on his chances for promotion, keeping him from reaching flag rank. After these assignments, Agar was sent on courses and on-shore duty for several years, including a stint as naval advisor to the New Zealand delegation to the London Naval Conference of 1930. On the 30th of September 1930, Agar was placed in command of the sloop HMS Scarborough attached to the North America and West Indies Squadron. During this time he married Ina Margaret Lindner in Bermuda, a union which lasted the rest of his life. He served aboard the Scarborough until September 1932. Other seagoing commands followed, first in early 1936 aboard the 4,190-ton anti-aircraft cruiser HMS Curlew, part of the reserve fleet at the Nore. Then, from the 15th of January 1937, he commanded his favorite ship, the 7,300-ton light cruiser HMS Emerald, which, along with her sister HMS Enterprise, was the fastest ship in the Royal Navy at 35 knots. Emerald was attached to the East India Station from January 1937 to July 1938. Agar then served as captain of the Royal Naval College, Greenwich, England, but with war in the offing he was returned to command of the Emerald in the summer of 1939.